Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Profile Pod. I'm your host, Andy Zaldivar. We have a very special guest tonight. Before we get going, though, I want to kind of thank everybody who participated or who checked in last night for our pilot episode, which we did last night. And thank you so much, Mr. James Taylor, for being our guest. You were so gracious and coming on and talking about the Insurance Lab podcast. So that was awesome, man. So thank you guys. Saw a lot of support, a lot of good stuff on Instagram, and a lot of good comments. So thank you so much, guys. That stuff is motivational for me, and we're just happy to get this Profile Pod going. So if you if you want to see if you want to co-host, come on. Discuss your podcast. We'll feature your podcast, talk about your business, and we'll get you some. We'll get you promoted. I got some promotion, definitely. Let's help each other out. Help each other. That's the name of the game. And tonight we have a fellow podcaster, and he's here to talk about his podcast. Of course, this podcast has been. You started it 2 years ago, was it, Danny?
Yeah. 2 years ago. So, FYI, conflict of interest. We are related. So
that's right. Yeah,
we are first cousins. Is that what you call it?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
something like that.
That's right.
So my podcast is on the sport of boxing. That's what we focus on. We're coming up on 2 years that we've done it. It's myself and my co-host Mike Shepard. He's actually English. He moved over here about 7-8 years ago from England. So it's a pretty good dynamic that we have between me and him. You got a Mexican American guy, and an English guy with an accent. So we've been doing it for 2 years, and we've been getting pretty good. I feel like without tooting our own horn, that we're probably one of the most prominent boxing podcasts in the game right now.
Okay, yeah, no, of course, man. And my apologies, I didn't introduce and present your podcast. We're talking about the Last Round podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the Stitcher, so among others. And and you guys come out with an episode every Monday, is it, Danny?
Yeah. So we normally record Monday nights. And then we get it up around Monday night, just before midnight, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock. So it's out for Tuesday morning. We have I think I mentioned it before to you when we talked offline, but we have a pretty prominent fan base, listener base in the UK. It's probably because Mike's English, but they're obviously, I believe they're 8 hours ahead from over here in the California area.
Right.
So we like to get it up around like 10 or 11 at night, West Coast time, because 8 hours ahead is like the morning time for the UK, and we usually get their morning rush hour. So it's pretty solid.
Right. No, that makes sense. I like that, man. That's strategic. And but it's funny. Before we go further, Danny, I wanted to mention how I didn't even know we're first cousins. I didn't know you had a podcast up until, I don't know, was that 2 months now, maybe at the most? And
just about.
And man, I was like, what the heck? I've been doing this for a little over a year now, January of 2019, and then I just stumbled upon it through your sister's Instagram account. I was like, hey, what the Danny Z Boxing? I saw something, man, caught my eyes, and sure enough, man, there you were, laid out, man, just. So I was impressive, man. I was impressed, and that the rest is history. Here we are, about 2 months later, and we're doing the Profile Pod, and it's funny, man.
You disappointed me, Andy. It sucks, but you should have found me a lot earlier.
I know, bro.
It's all right. It's all right. You're familia, so I'll give you a pass.
That's right. I appreciate it, man. I knew you would understand, Danny. But yeah, man, this is great, man. No, this is great. I didn't thank you before earlier. I thank you for coming on, taking the time, man, and it's an honor to have you here. The Profile Pod. This is our debut episode, man.
It is.
It is our debut, so this is a milestone, and I'm glad. familia's part of it, bro. You know, so
We got to do that all together, man.
That's right, bro, and that's right, man. We're sporting our Dodger blue. I mean, come on, no, you know,
for Danny Z, right there.
That's for Danny. Okay, right.
But no, yeah, it's cool. I mean, like you said, you know, we both found out like within the last couple months that we each had podcasts and stuff like that, and
for sure.
You know, you focus on the '90s, of course. I think you got a lot of content right there in that time period. I know we've talked offline a lot ever since we found out we're kind of both in the same field for this.
Yeah.
And I kind of give you some tips on, you know, what I think from my perspective, and you know, like I told you when I mentioned reviewing like De La Hoya Chavez, that fight was in the '90s.
Oh yeah, man.
So you know,
no, of course, man.
Stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the '90s, that decade is, that was that's my wheelhouse right there. You know, I grew up in the '90s. You know, high school all through. I started in the high school in 1990. I mean, and then I went to the military in the mid '90s. Then I came back home. Then I went back to college. Finished college in the late '90s. So you know, '90s they hold a special place in my heart. And yeah, man, that was definitely a lot of content to go from there, man. But so Danny, man, back to the last round. So how did you get into podcasting? How did that happen, man?
Well, let me kind of rewind it to how I actually got into boxing. Because I haven't just been podcasting. I've been podcasting for like the last two or so years, maybe 3. I was on another show before that for a little bit. But how
long did you do that, by the way? No, I'm sorry. How long did you do that previous podcast? I was just curious.
Probably about 7-8 months. It wasn't like I was just kind of like I was added. It wasn't really I didn't really have control of the show. I was just kind of added because they knew I could talk pretty well. So, but you know, I never saw myself there too long. But when I was in college, I wrote for like the student newspaper. And then I did that more to kind of help my writing style. Because I took a lot of law classes in my undergrad and all that stuff. So I did a lot of writing, obviously. So I joined the student newspaper more to improve my writing ability. And I started writing sports, obviously, because sports is easy for me. And then I became the sports editor and stuff like that. So I started covering a lot of local sports in college, like basketball, volleyball. I would go to these events and interview the athletes and stuff, and it was easy for me to relate because I was an athlete, and then I'm a big guy. I'm 6'7", so
that's 6'7", man.
6'7", bro.
You got the good genes, man. You got the good. Anyways,
but what are you, like 6'2"?
Yeah, I'm not too shabby.
Más o menos. But when I graduated, for about 2 years or so, 2.5, 3 years or something like that, I didn't write. I didn't do journalism or anything like that. But I always knew I kind of wanted to get back into it in some form.
For sure.
And I knew that basketball and baseball, like pro sports like MLB, NBA, were like really hard to get into in terms of getting into it professionally, like as a journalist or a reporter. So I was kind of like surveying the landscape, and then I was like, you know what? Like, I'm a hardcore boxing fan. I think I can get into that. And so
that's cool.
I just Googled some sites, and I found one site. It's out of business, but at the time it was called page2sports.com. They covered all sports. They had writers from all over the world, and I noticed that they only had an MMA section. They didn't have a boxing section. So I reached out to the editor. I forgot. I sent an email that I found on their website, and then I sent them writing samples that I had before.
Really?
That I wrote on. I think I wrote one like on Floyd Mayweather. I wrote some like that day on like popular fighters, because I knew that some of these guys they're not hardcore boxing fans, so I can't write one on like an obscure boxer. So I wrote it like on a big personality who they know everybody knows like a Floyd Mayweather, like a Manny
Right,
Pacquiao.
right.
I think I did it on that, and I sent it to them, and they got back to me within like an hour.
Yeah.
And I took over their boxing section pretty much.
What year was this? I'm sorry. What year?
Like 2014, I believe.
Okay.
A couple
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
And ever since then, like I wrote for a couple different sites from that point forward, and from like 2014 up until now, I probably attended as a press member, getting actual media credentials. I probably attended over 100 fights from Vegas to Southern California.
Oh, very cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember back then you were getting into the whole. I didn't know exactly what you were doing. I would just hear through the grapevine you were involved, and I'd see pictures, and so I didn't know what exactly you were doing, but now I know.
Yeah.
It's but that's great, man. That's where you kind of wanted to, so actually, so 7-8 months you did the previous podcast, and then you wrote for the paper in college, and then after that, so go ahead, take it from there. You graduated from college.
So I wrote for a couple different sites after. I helped out a couple different boxing sites, a couple different sports sites, and they would send me to to events. Like I pretty much I already knew how to navigate the game out here, because LA, I mean, to a casual boxing fan, like if like somebody's watching this who wants to like get their children or their son or their daughter into like boxing, like, hey, I want to kind of get him into that,
right.
Maybe see if I can get him into the amateurs and stuff. Like, if you don't I don't want to say like it's absolutely a necessity, but if you live in the LA area, in the Southern California area, and you get into boxing, it's a lot easier to make connections in this area, because we're such a hotbed from Vegas to LA. There's a ton of boxing gyms. There's a ton of professional boxers out here. There's a ton of executives in the sport out here. There's a ton of promotions. I mean, top ranked promotions is in Vegas. Golden Boy Promotions is in downtown LA.
Right.
We still got the Staples Center here. We got Hollywood.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a big hotbed. But so like I've been like a writer. I did like a YouTube channel where I would interview fighters. I've interviewed Pacquiao. I've interviewed Floyd Mayweather.
Very cool, man.
I've interviewed Tyson Fury. I've interviewed Deontay Wilder.
Nice.
So I've been. If you name them, I've probably talked to them before. So Canelo, Triple G.
Sweet Pea Whitaker. No, okay, I don't know.
I've seen him. I've never talked to him, but I've seen him at a fight.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I wanted to get your take on this, man. I thought of this question earlier, and I wanted to get your take. I'm not deep into boxing like for example, football or basketball, baseball. So I'm, a casual fan, right? I'm a casual fan. You can say that. But do you think like the ascent and popularity of MMA kind of affected boxing in any way?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I'm not really on the bandwagon in terms of like MMA versus boxing. Like, MMA sucks, boxing sucks. Like, I'm not one of those guys. Like, I like MMA. I know. I have a good friend who lives in the New York, New Jersey area.
Right.
Who's big into MMA. He's also a reporter and stuff. And he's like an encyclopedia. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So anytime I have an MMA question, like, I go to him.
Okay.
But I do think it did affect it for a period of time, for years, especially when UFC started blowing up.
Right.
So I do think that there's a lot of fans that probably left. But even though like all those people who would say boxing is dead or they were write pieces, like there's a guy in the LA Times who writes a piece like every year that boxing is dead, and all these boxing fans and boxing purists get so offended by him, but he's doing it on purpose. He's doing it on purpose because he gets that reaction. It's a reporter for the LA Times. His name's his name's Hernandez.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
But I've never thought like boxing was dead and stuff. Did it take a little bit of a reduction in a sense. Yeah, it did.
Okay.
But I mean, now that like in the last couple of years that like DAZN, that new sports streaming app that's focused on boxing, ever since HBO got out of the game and DAZN pretty much picked up all the contracts from HBO, that was a big move. Fox started picking up a lot of fights. ESPN started picking up a lot of fights. So, I mean, we're always going to be there, man. Boxing is a sweet science, and it goes back hundreds of years.
Oh yeah, man. I think you posted some historical video or photo. I think it was on Twitter, man. And on this day in 1900, I think it was a fight from the 1900, the year 1900. 1901, I think it might have been, and I was just like, "Wow!" I mean, just shocked,
No. You know what? I got to give credit where credit is due on those. My co-host Mike pretty much runs our Instagram and Twitter account for the show. He'll ask me about some posts sometimes, or like, if I feel we need to share something, then I'll like we're good with communication. But all those historical posts that you see, that's all him, man. He does that research.
That's great.
He does that research and he puts them out. And fans love it. Fans love seeing history like that in the sport, and they start engaging in those posts. So, yeah, man, that all the credit to him on that. He's good at that.
That's awesome, man. And speaking of your partner, bro, I'm gonna like segue right into your partner, man. How did you guys start that partnership? How did that come about, man?
So I met him before we linked up on the podcast. I met him probably, I don't know, a year and a half before, or I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he knows, but he came up to me at a fight. He came up to me at a fight. I don't know if it was like at the StubHub Center in Carson, or it might have been at the Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio, California. I don't know. It was at a fight somewhere in Southern California. He had came up to me because, like, by that point I had already been attending a lot of events, and my name had been around at least the LA boxing scene for quite a few years. And then when I go to events, obviously I'm noticed because I'm tall. So he came up to me, and he's like 6'3", 6'4" too. He's a big guy.
Oh wow, okay.
So he came up to me at a fight, and he introduced himself. And he had said, "Hey, man, like I've seen your work, and he pitched me the podcast. He's like, I was wondering if you kind of wanted to start like a podcast or show." Oh, wow. And at that time I was already doing the other show, and I was kind of in the mix with that one. So I told him, I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm actually committed to this one right now. I was like, but I told him, I was like, but if it doesn't work out, I was like, let's revisit that. And he's like, yeah, no problem. So I would talk to him here and there. I'd see him at events and stuff like that. He was cool. He was a cool guy. And I remember when the other show ended, he messaged me. He texted me a couple months later, and he's like, "Hey, are you guys still doing that show? You guys haven't posted anything." And I told him, I was like, "Oh no, it's over." And he brought it to me again. He's like, "Oh, so what do you think? Do you want to revisit it?" And we started pitching ideas to each other, and I kind of saw that he had a very strong mindset for the game. Like he was really into it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, "Oh wow!" I was like, "He's, he impressed me." So, and that's that cool. That was over 2 years ago, because we started planning for this probably we started the show I think in July of 2018, June, July, and we started planning it I think probably like in March of 2018. So, so yeah, man, and we're still going. So he's solid. He's a solid guy, man, and we both work together to provide this content for fans. So it's pretty cool.
No, for sure, man. I noticed the chemistry is there, and you guys work well together, man. Good collaboration there, and I was just curious how you guys met and all that, and how that came about. And by the way, I listened to a little bit of your. I was telling you that I listened to a little bit of your first this latest episode, and yeah, man, it's I wanted to get more, but
yeah,
my toddlers are disagreeable, bro. So I'm gonna get to it, bro. I'm gonna get to it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, bro. And we're talking to Danny Z from the Last Round podcast. Danny, So you guys are, I think you said 2 years now. Your podcast is 2 years old now.
Yeah. So
Just about there.
yeah. So we've done, I think, 75 like official, like, in what would you call them, in studio episodes, but in total I think we've probably done maybe over 90 or almost 100, because every time we go to events we also do shows from the fights. So we wait until after the fight is over. We wait until after the fight is over, and then we'll get, like, if we see like we look as we're there covering the fight, we're also looking around to see who's in the crowd or any fighters and stuff. And we, as the fights are going on, we like talk back and forth, like, hey, we can get him. Let's ask him, see if he wants to jump on after the show, or let's ask him. And we kind of pick out people.
That's cool, man.
And we pretty much do shows at fights every single time. We've done shows in India. We've done shows at the StubHub. We've done shows at Staples Center. We've done shows at and Mike's done shows in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand and the T-Mobile Arena. So we've done shows at gyms, and we've had some pretty solid guests on, man.
I know, man.
Really good guests, yeah.
Very impressive, man. Danny, have you heard of Thompson Boxing? I'm sure you've heard of Thompson.
Yeah, they're in Ontario. Yeah.
I've been to their.
They fight at the DoubleTree Hotel.
DoubleTree and Corona. Have you been to the Corona facility down there?
Yeah, I've never been to any of the Corona fights, but I've been to like quite a few in the Ontario fights. Ken Thompson is the guy who owns Thompson Boxing. He's a tall guy with glasses, white guy.
Yeah,
he's always wearing like really colorful suits. There's a fighter who's he actually just lost his unified world championships, but he'll be back though. He's a great fighter. He fights at 122 pounds. His name's Danny Roman. He started with Thompson Boxing. And then he unified titles at 122. He just lost it in Miami a couple months ago, but he's going to get a rematch. And he's a really good fighter. He fights out of here in, I think, the LA area. He started in Thompson Boxing. Tim Bradley Jr., who fought Pacquiao a couple times.
Okay.
He lives out. He's out. Yeah, he fought Pacquiao, I think, 2 or 3 times. He lives out there. They call him Desert Storm because he lives out there in the Indio area. Desert Storm, Timothy Bradley.
Yes, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's also a commentator for ESPN right now. He's already retired, but he started at Thompson's Boxing.
Chris Arreola.
Yeah, man. Chris Arreola. Yeah, he's from the Riverside area, Riverside, California. I've interviewed him too. I remember his interview. He talked about a lot of weed because he smokes a lot of weed. But he's a cool guy. I interviewed just before he fought Wilder. He fought Deontay Wilder. Yeah, man, Thompson Boxing is I don't get to as many of them as the smaller shows as I can, but I like the small regional promotions like that because it gives these young up and coming boxers like a chance to kind of show off their skills who can't get signed by the bigger promotional names.
Right. Of course.
So I'm all about the smaller promotions, man. I hope they keep it going.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I'm thinking when did you get into boxing though, bro? I mean, is this something that like maybe when you were a kid, elementary school aged, and you always loved boxing? Was that always your favorite sport, or how did that come about? Growing up.
Boxing was always there. I mean, my favorite sport's always. I would say now it's a tie between baseball and boxing.
Okay.
But initially, when I was a kid, it was baseball. I mean, I think you know that
for sure.
But I always liked boxing. I mean, growing up, especially when De La Hoya would fight, you'd order the pay-per-view and a bunch of people would come over and watching the fight, how these family barbecues and stuff. And I remember people came over when it was De La Hoya Vargas. And they came over to my parents' house and our house was packed.
That's right.
Some people were going for Vargas, some people were going to De La Hoya. I remember the moments like that. I remember Mosley De La Hoya. I remember Chavez, De La Hoya, and stuff like that. And even going back to the mid 2000s, obviously, I remember De La Hoya Mayweather. Obviously, that's a little later, but
man, those are good
stuff
fights.
like that.
But your dad was a big. Sorry, I didn't even cut you. Your dad was he's always been a big boxing fan. Your dad.
Yeah. He's always, he's a boxing fan. I wouldn't call him hardcore, but
Oh, really?
yeah, I wouldn't call him like hardcore, but like
Okay.
he's anytime there's like obviously a Mexican fighter, and
Big,
especially if
yeah.
they're good. I mean, it's natural. They start rooting for them. Like De La Hoya was big, Chavez was big. Canelo. Every time Canelo fights, my dad's always watching it.
For sure, man.
I let him use my DAZN account, so he watches the Canelo fights and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, like I just always got into it, man. Like I just feel like there's nothing like two fighters in the ring going at it. Like leading up to the fight, you're training, you're with your team, you're training and training hard, and your team's helping you train strength and conditioning, power, speed, and all that stuff. But on fight day, it's just you and your opponent across the ring, nobody else, and you guys have to duke it out. I don't think there's nothing in the world like it, man.
No, man. Boxing is it definitely takes a certain kind of human being, man, to do. I played football, man, and boxing scares the what out of me, man. Yeah, man.
Water polo.
Oh, yeah. In eighth grade, and then I became a man. And no, bro.
Man, there's nothing like it, man. They're really, that's what you call it, the sweet science.
That's the sweet science, bro. And I like the name, the word pugilist.
Yeah, that's a popular term in the boxing circles.
That's awesome, bro. That's awesome, man. So, and where do you guys usually record, Danny? The last round.
So before obviously what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Obviously we send our thoughts to everybody who's been affected by it, and hopefully you're doing okay and we're all doing okay as we get through this stuff. But
absolutely.
But before all this stuff was happening, we would go to an actual studio every week, like a professional studio. We would have an audio engineer, and they would set up everything for us, and they would time us, and then we would do it, and they would edit it for us, and then send us a file, and then we would upload it. But obviously the last several weeks or something, exactly where you're using now, this StreamYard app, we've been using this.
Okay.
So
right.
Normally we haven't done video interviews, because we know video is a big field to get into for podcasts. We know there's a lot of radio shows like like the Breakfast Club, Brick Boy in the Morning, and stuff like that. Who they're syndicated. They're on radio, and then like some of them are on podcasts, and then they also film their interviews and they put it on YouTube. So we know YouTube is a big opportunity to reach more people.
Right.
But we wanted to make sure before we dived into that we did everything right. We had all the right presentation and stuff.
Of course.
So obviously with this going on, we had to kind of improvise, but I mean, it's been working so far. I really like this StreamYard app. I really like it, and we did one yesterday with a referee, a veteran referee. His name's Jack Reese. He's from Ventura County. He lives over there.
Oh, really? He's over here. Which city?
I think he's. Oh, you know what? I don't. I forget. He did tell us the city, but I forgot. I gotta watch the episode. But he's a real estate agent over there too on his free time. So he's also he's a pro referee, and then he's a retired fire captain for LA.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it's LA City or LA County Fire. It's one of those. Wow. And then he's been a pro referee for several years. He's one of the best in the game. He mentioned on our show yesterday that you can catch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all that stuff. That he was in the running to. He was one of the 4 referees being considered for the second Canelo Triple G rematch.
Very cool, man. I gotta get him on here, man. Jeez. We'll talk after, bro.
No, he's cool, man. He's a very cool guy. So if you guys really want to know, even as a casual fan, if any of your listeners or anybody watching this, they really want to know what a fight referee, especially like a boxing referee, goes through, well, how they think when they stop a fight, what they look for in the eyes, what their training is like, or if what they look at in terms of fighters and stuff like that. Listen to the interview we had with him yesterday. He's a great talker. He's a great interview, and he's very detailed in his answers. And very I think a lot of people would be interested in what he has to say.
Oh yeah, man, definitely. And I was also listening to the one you did before that. Was it David Diamante? Is that his name?
Yeah. So David Diamante is an announcer
Great story, man.
So everybody, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know who Michael Buffer is. Michael Buffer is probably
Let's get ready to rumble.
Yeah, exactly. He's the guy who said, "Let's get ready to rumble." And then he's probably one of the most, if not the most famous, in-ring announcer.
Of course.
In the world.
Yeah.
So David Diamante is also another announcer, just like that. And he's an exclusive announcer for DAZN and Matchroom Boxing, Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, and he's from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
And he has a great story. He was like a DJ at first, and then he was an exclusive announcer for the Brooklyn Nets. So he worked for Jay-Z over there in New York area. And another fun fact about him, he hasn't cut his hair since 1988. So his hair goes all the way down like past his knees. It's pretty crazy. So if you guys Google David Diamante boxing, you guys can check out his hair on the Google images or something, and you'll see how long his hair is.
Right, man. It's like I think it's like, is it dreadlocks or is
I think so. Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah. Great story, man. Brooklyn, New York, and man. Anybody from New York City, man, has a great story. It seems like, man. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, we got to get him on here too. We'll talk after Danny. We'll talk.
Yeah, we'll get him on, man.
Yeah, man. So you mentioned kind of how you get your, you approach your guests. You might see them, at a fight. But what other ways do you go about, reaching out to potential guests and booking them and stuff like that? How do you guys go about that way?
Well, I'll book some guests, especially if I know them or some. There's a lot of times, especially if they're like lesser known fighters or lesser known personalities, they'll reach out to us. We probably get on average, on a weekly basis, we probably get maybe between 5 and 10 solicitations from people in the sport who call, ask us, or they message us to be on the show. And then we let them know, hey, let us check the schedule. We have people booked up, but we'll get back to you, and we'll talk about it beforehand. But
right.
But I gotta give credit where credit is due to Mike. Mike probably schedules 90% of our guests. Even if we don't have, even if we don't know a certain person, or he'll ask me before, hey, do you have any connection to so and so, or do you know anybody who knows so and so? And I'll tell him, oh yeah, I was I know this person. Let me reach out to this person, and then we can get a connect. And if I don't, or if he doesn't, then he'll just message them on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook. And then what we do is that we send, what he does is when he messages them, he says hey, we have a podcast. Here's our links to our show so you can see that we're legit if they don't know who we are. And then we always put a list of the biggest guests we ever had. And these people have been on our show the last 2 years. So that way people who read it, they're oh, okay, these guys are pretty pro. So that makes them feel more comfortable to come on if they're not aware of who we are. And yeah, I mean, I got to give credit to Mike. Mike,
that's good.
Schedules 90% of our interviews, and it works out every single time, pretty much.
Yeah. You guys do a great job of getting some really interesting guests. We've already been talking about it, but you go down the list, man. That's pretty cool. And I remember when I was checking out your podcast online. I was just very impressed with all the guests you've had and how well your podcast was put together, man. So you definitely inspired me, Primo. Yeah, I know, man. You've been I've been picking your brain but
no, yeah. I mean, in terms of guests, if people can go to just type in the Last Round podcast or the Last Round into iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Spotify and stuff like that. People can just see the type of guests that we've had. Probably some of the most notable ones we've had. Who Andy Ruiz is?
Oh yeah.
Andy Ruiz, obviously, a lot of people know who he is within the last year because he beat Anthony Joshua. He's the first Mexican fighter to win the heavyweight championship of the world. So Andy Ruiz, about a month and a half before he got the Anthony Joshua fight, he fought out here at the StubHub Center. On Fox, and he stopped the guy. The guy he fought, it was this German guy or something, I believe. He stopped him, and So, at that point, Ruiz, like, he didn't have the Anthony Joshua fight because Anthony Joshua was scheduled to fight. He was scheduled to fight this guy from Brooklyn, Big Baby Miller, Jarrell
Okay.
Big Baby Miller. But Jarrell Big Baby Miller got popped for steroids, so they took
Jeez.
him out of the fight. So I believe the week before or the week of Andy Ruiz's fight, out here at the StubHub Center, he was on our show. He called in and he was on our show.
Very cool.
When we helped him profile, he talked about his fight right here in LA coming up that week.
Oh, nice.
And then we asked him, obviously, because like he's also, even though he wasn't a known name at the time, his record was really good. And he was coming up. So we asked him about Anthony Joshua, all the other big heavyweights in the world, the landscape. And then about 3 weeks later, when Anthony Joshua needed an opponent in New York at Madison Square Garden, 3 weeks later, you hear that. No. Let me rephrase that. I completely slipped my mind. So the day that they released the news that Anthony Joshua's opponent, Jarrell Miller, got popped for steroids and he was removed as an opponent, that it happened that morning. The news broke that morning, and Andy Ruiz was already scheduled to come on our show that night. So we were the first interview that he did, and he broke the news on our show saying that he messaged Anthony Joshua's promoter on Instagram, which his name's Eddie Hearn. He messaged him on Instagram and said, "Hey, I'll fight Anthony Joshua. Give me the spot." And like 2-3 weeks later, Andy Ruiz got the fight.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. And that was what, like about a year and a half ago now, right? Maybe.
Yeah, it was like in May, June of last year, because the first fight against Anthony Joshua was in June, so it was probably like the end of May.
Yeah,
beginning of June sometime.
Definitely, man. Andy Ruiz, yeah, no, that's huge, man. That's huge. And so, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we're talking about the last round. Danny Z is in the house to talk about his podcast every Monday. You can follow him on Instagram. You can follow him on Twitter. So, Danny, man, what is it that you love about podcasting? I got to know, man. Because I know what I love about it. I know, how much I enjoy it and all those good things. But I'm curious, man. It's always nice to see when I ask, asking fellow podcasters, they're getting their take on stuff and stuff like that when it comes to podcasting. What do you love about it, man?
I mean, I just like that it's like kind of free flowing. I like writing and stuff, but ever since we've done the podcast, I don't think I haven't wrote that much in terms of like articles, and because it's so much easier just to talk to somebody, and especially now in this digital age, a lot of people like are consuming more and more content in terms of like videos, audio, and stuff like that. So we kind of saw it from the beginning a couple of years ago, saying, you know what, like, we got to jump into that game, because like there's still people who read news articles and stuff like that. But I mean, like, I don't think anybody's gonna. I'm not saying this to be like, like mean to people in this field, but like I don't think it's a secret that like newspapers are kind of slowly dying off. Like it's sad because newspapers are it's a bedrock of the press's foundation, but
for sure.
But like journalists and reporters in that field, like it's not as lavish in terms of money as people think it is. It's hard. It's a hard job. Yeah. It's a hard job. It's a hard career. And so we kind of saw that from the beginning, like years ago. And obviously right now the big thing is that, video content, podcasting, audio and stuff like that. Like that's a lot of people like to consume that. That's a big thing. Especially with guys like Joe Rogan. Obviously look at the success of Joe Rogan. Whether you agree with him or not, he's successful.
Oh yeah.
Whether you agree with him or not, he's successful. So
absolutely.
I'm able to recognize successes in other people. Even whether I agree with them or not, like I recognize how they do the game, how they got to that level. Right. Yeah, man, and and I've interviewed a bunch of fighters over the years. So like I feel like I have a good grasp in in talking to fighters, talking to personalities, talking to people. We don't really have, like, Mike does a lot of the research before each guest, and we kind of have like a rough layout of what we're going to hit. But most of the time, at least for me, I like just having like a free flow interview, and I ask them questions, and then a lot of follow-up questions that I have are just questions that I didn't even think about before. It's just something they say during the interview, and I ask about it, and I follow
for sure.
up. Yeah.
No, no, definitely, man. Someone will say something, and it's like, oh wait, yeah, and then and it comes back to you, 30 minutes later or whatever. You mentioned free flowing, man. Yeah, podcasting is definitely free flowing, bro. It's I caught the bug, man. I caught the bug for sure, man. I love doing this, man. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun, man. And I've always wanted to get into. I've always had an appreciation for the arts, performing arts and stuff like that. Acting, I've done some acting in my past, and just performing, and also watching how things get done, like behind the scenes, how a production is, whether it's movie or television or music or a song, how things are put together on stage, all that's fascinating to me. So anyways, that's why I enjoy it, man. But it's definitely free flowing, man, like you said. And you could take it any direction you want, man. It's interesting, but
right.
So what's on the horizon?
You can totally take it any direction.
No, for sure, man.
On the horizon,
what's on the horizon for the last round, bro?
On the horizon for us right now, there's some guests that we've been talking about trying to get on. I don't want to reveal them yet because some of them are actually pretty big names. So we're in the process of talking to some of them right now.
Give us an exclusive, Danny. Give us an exclusive, man. Come on.
I can't tell you that this isn't happening now, but he hasn't been on our show, but he has agreed to do our show, but we just haven't found the time because he's such a busy guy. But Manny Pacquiao knows who we are. So
nice.
So Pacquiao, the last time he fought, when he fought, I think Keith Thurman, I think it was February of, or the last time he fought, last year? I forgot, or maybe this year, I forgot. Mike had messaged his team, and I believe Pacquiao's wife responded to the email, and she asked like, can you send over the questions? Like, what are you guys going to ask? I mean, we understand when the bigger you are, your PR team or your people are going to ask like, hey, can you kind of send us what you're going to ask?
Yeah.
Because, especially because he's a politician, we understand the game. So
for sure,
we sent over some stuff, and she responded and she said, yeah, he's going to be in Hollywood because he trains in Hollywood with Freddie Roach at the Wild Card Gym on Hollywood and Vine.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, he's going to be out there for training. Hopefully, he said, he'll do it. So maybe you guys can come by the gym and we can do it and stuff like that. But we didn't expect anything because we know he's a very busy guy. So when they got here, we messaged again, and she had said, oh, you know what? He got booked up with this and that. But like, we didn't push it. We're just glad to be on the radar for him. So eventually, I'm pretty sure we'll land him.
There's nothing wrong with being on his radar, bro.
Right.
No,
it's pretty sweet, man. It's pretty sweet.
That's awesome, bro. That's awesome, man.
And we also had for people like who want to listen to other interviews, the regulatory commission, the State of California Commission for Combat Sports in the state of California, the California State Athletic Commission. We had their executive director. His name's Andy Foster. He's been on our show. He's been on our show. He was on our show about 2 months ago. And he's a great guy. He knows how to talk to the media. And he talked about like steroid use in combat sports. He talked about different things. So that's also a good one. He's the highest government official in the state of California for combat sports. So that was a big get for us as well.
Andy, yeah, you were telling me about him a couple of days ago. You mentioned Andy Foster. That's a. When did you do that interview? I'm going to look that up.
I believe it was January. I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe we interviewed him in January.
I gotta check that out, bro. I gotta check that out, man. Hey, let's check out the audience here, Danny. We our good friend James Taylor. How you doing, James? He is a huge boxing fan. My buddy James, Danny, and you were. Was it you that told me that he? No, yeah, you told me that you had Ali. Was it Ali on the show?
Ali Sekbak. Ali Sekbak is for boxing fans who obviously hardcore boxing fans, and I'm sure even casual fans who have seen like a boxing interview or boxing video here or there. Ali Sekbak is one of the most prominent boxing YouTube channels, YouTube reporters in the game. He used to be like an NBA reporter. He was always at Staples Center with Kobe. He has videos with Kobe and stuff like that. And then he got into boxing like years ago. So he has one. If you Google Elie Seckbach ES News on YouTube, he has over like 600,000 subscribers and stuff like that. He's one of the most prominent boxing YouTube channels. He's been on our show. We interviewed him in Phoenix in December at the Chavez Jr. Danny Jacobs fight in downtown Phoenix. He jumped on our show after that fight for a couple minutes, so we're grateful to him for doing that. So we've had a bunch of other reporters on. Chris Mannix, who covers the NBA, and now he works for Sports Illustrated, and also works for DAZN. He's been on our show. Kevin Iole, who works for he's a boxing and MMA reporter for Yahoo Sports. He was on our show recently. Doug Fisher, who he's the editor-in-chief for The Ring Magazine. The Ring Magazine's been around. The Ring Magazine's been around since 1925 or something like that. He's the editor-in-chief. He's the editor-in-chief of that magazine. So he's been on our show about 3 times. So people love hearing from him because he's probably, out of all the people I've met in the sport, he's probably the person. And there might be other people, I just haven't met them yet, but he probably knows the most about that sport. He's an encyclopedia, man. So if you want to talk boxing for hours, he's your guy, man.
That is just amazing, bro. Amazing, man.
Mm-hmm.
We Ali, because I mentioned to James that you had him on your show, and right away he was like, "Oh my good." He was like, "Yeah, I know who Ali is." And as a matter of fact, I think James, if you're there, I think you know him too, right? Anyways, but he
lives in LA. He's from out here in LA. So, I'm sure a lot of boxing fans in the LA area and the Southern California area have seen him at fights. So he's always there.
Yeah. He was super impressed for sure, man. Ali, and James again, man. James is a big boxing fan. Man. I told him, and another friend, Matt, he was supposed to check in as well. He's very close to Kenny Thompson, and he's. I've been to those fights in Ontario at the is it the Marriott?
The DoubleTree.
DoubleTree. I'm sorry, the DoubleTree there. I always get those mixed up. I don't know why.
It's all right.
The DoubleTree right there. I mean, he's been doing those since I don't know. I want to say probably mid 2000s now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to those like in 2010. 2011.
Right.
10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago now. So, man, I turned him on to your podcast. I told him, hey, you know what? My cousin Danny is a big boxing fan, big boxing guy. His podcast is dedicated to boxing. You guys better check it out, And so, but I think this is going to definitely help, motivate them to check out if they haven't already, one of your episodes. Yeah. See, look, Jay, you got a new fan. There it is, bro. There it is, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, man. James, I want to thank you, James, for checking in, man. He's been commenting since we he wants to chime in. Let's get him on the show. Let's call him up. James, you there? Because he's
game time decision.
I know, right? He's chomping at the bit, man. He's a big boxing guy, so you got yourself a new listener there, Danny. You know,
the more the merrier, man. We're here to, especially now in these crazy times, we just want to provide, entertainment for people locked up in their houses as much as possible.
you know what? There's a high demand, I think for podcasters right now, man, for us, and I'm glad that we're able to provide this service, for all the good people out there, but I'm just a public servant, Danny. I'm just here, and like I said, yeah, you make a great point, man. Entertain the people, entertain ourselves. We enjoy doing this. We enjoy, being on the podcast. And what is James saying over here? Reporting, James.
Ellie Segback reporting. That's what he's saying. That's probably why he's saying that. Reporting.
See, look at that, a little inside joke already, bro. See, the connection's already there, man.
I'm assuming that's why he's saying that. I could be wrong, but Ellie Segback, that's what he says in his stuff, and a lot of fans know that word. That's like his moniker. He goes reporting.
So. That's probably him, man. That's probably him. Yeah, man. Ask him. I don't know if you can see the comments, right, Danny?
I don't know. Let me see if I can.
He wants to know what you.
Yeah, I can see him right here. It kind of goes away from the string, but okay. So he says, what boxing podcasts and/or reporters does he follow? Honestly, I follow a ton of them.
We've lost Danny, ladies and gentlemen. We will get him right back here.
Oh.
All right, you there?
Are we okay?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. It just booted me off, but
just cut out. Right? You were good. We're good.
Okay, but back to my question. He asked, do I follow like reporters podcasts?
Yeah.
For reporters, honestly, like I follow a ton of reporters. There's a lot of them that like a lot of people don't know their names, but like I follow like other YouTube channels. Like there's a Fight Hub TV. There's a guy named Marcos Villegas who's the founder and owner of Fight Hub TV YouTube channel.
Wow.
He's very knowledgeable. He's a good guy. I follow Ellie Segback, of course, because he's a big personality in the sport. There's a couple guys who work for The Athletic, Lance Pugmire and Mike Coppinger. They both used to work for like big newspaper chains like USA Today, LA Times. There's obviously I don't know if your fans know this, but the main boxing reporter for like the last 20, 30 years or something for ESPN, his name's Dan Raphael.
Wow.
They just ESPN's not renewing his contract, so that just broke this morning. So they're not
really.
I think they're going to go in a new direction, and he's been their reporter for like over 20 years.
What was his name again? Don Raphael?
Dan Raphael.
Dan Raphael.
There's other like obscure personalities in the sport that I follow, like promoters or like maybe boxing managers, boxing agents. There's also like certain accounts that I follow that I know we all know that they're in the business, but they have a fake account because they do leaks. They do boxing leaks where they leak information.
Oh.
Wow. So and then I follow obviously the major promoters and stuff like that. And even if there's stuff like that I don't see real time. Mike, if something's like big news, he'll message me about it. And he'll say, "Hey, look, this is what's going on right now." And then we like talk about it, and we're like, "Oh, should we address it or should we post it?" We kind of talk about like the PR side of it, like, and sometimes we're just like, "Oh, you know what? That's kind of too sensitive. Let's just stay out of it," a lot of the game, I mean, I'm sure but a lot of the game in podcasting, especially when you're in a sport, in a major prominent sport, you have to think about the PR side of things too. And some people don't think about that, but like that's the nature of the game and in this world.
No, absolutely, man. No doubt, man. No doubt. It's you know. But what about any casual podcasts or unrelated to boxing, unrelated podcasts? Do you listen to anything, miscellaneous?
I mean, like,
Any conspiracy theory
I,
podcast?
I mean, I listen to other boxing podcasts. There's a couple, but like in terms of like unrelated podcasts, you know, I think Joe Rogan has. I like how he diversifies his people, his guests.
Yeah.
So there's sometimes where like I see some people that he has, and I like listening to them because it's interesting. Obviously, that's a big one. I think that's a given.
Yeah.
And then there's and then sometimes like the channel Vice.
Oh yeah.
Vice has a couple podcasts sometimes where like they profile some crazy stuff. I listened to the Jeffrey Epstein. I think they did a Jeffrey Epstein one, or I don't know if it was them or ABC News.
Oh wow.
And then I like to listen to a lot of like history ones. Like there was one that like talked about like 9/11, like what happened during that time, and then there was another one talked about like Bill Clinton and everything that happened during his time, and then there was another one talked about like there's another one that's going on right now that talks about like history, like Trump or George Bush, and I like a lot of history stuff.
Okay.
And then in sports, obviously boxing, as I mentioned, but
of course, man.
But yeah, I mean, like, and then I listened to I mean, I think I think we're all into it, but like we obviously used to be into hardcore like wrestling, WWF when we were kids.
Oh yeah.
A lot of those guys who were like executives backstage or they were old wrestlers, they're all older now, and a lot of them are are in podcasting.
Wow.
So they're telling all these old school stories from like the 90s. And they're telling about all this backstage news from like Vince McMahon. And
they probably have great stories, man.
And honestly, bro, like those are some of the most interesting some of the most interesting podcasts I've heard and what they talk about, because because you think about like, oh man, when I was a kid, I was watching Bret the Hitman Hart, Razor Ramon, and stuff like that, and then they talk about these guys. Oh yeah, I remember when Razor Ramon did this, and then he told Hogan that he was going to do this, but he didn't do it, and Hogan, and it's all real life stuff, and it's cool, man. Yeah. I like stuff like that, man. Kind of bending the fourth wall like that.
That's super cool, man. What can you tell me the name of one of those podcasts? Or do you know off the top of your head one of those wrestling related podcasts?
Well, there's a few of them. There's a wrestler called, his name is Chris Jericho.
Oh yeah.
He has a podcast right now. It's called Talk is Jericho. He has a lot of interesting guests, not just in wrestling, but all over. But like obviously his fan base are wrestling fans.
Okay.
Do you remember Chris Benoit?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The guy who murdered his family in the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
So he still has a son and a daughter from another marriage, and they've never got like, nobody's ever wanted anything to do with them, even though it wasn't their fault. So there was an interview that Chris Jericho did on his podcast where he interviewed the son. The son's like in his 20s now.
Okay.
And he interviewed the son, and he asked him like, what do you think about what your dad did? And it was a very compelling interview because like nobody wants to associate with Chris Benoit because of what he did, murdered his family and stuff like that. Yeah. So like that was one of the first times that his son, who's still alive, spoke out about it and what he thought about it. So stuff like that was interesting.
Wow.
And there's another one. There was another executive named Bruce Pritchard. He used his wrestling name used to be Brother Love.
Okay.
He doesn't do his show anymore, but like he has a lot of them, like where you can just go look at them. His show was called Something to Wrestle With, and he talked about a lot of backstage stuff because he was right there, like right hand man to Vince McMahon and all those guys in back in the day. So he talked about a lot of backstage stuff, like stuff that you always think about, like what was happening behind that curtain.
Right.
He talks about a lot of that stuff. That one's called Something to Wrestle With, and there's other ones, man. There's a lot of other ones, but they're out there. You just have to look.
Oh no, for sure. I'm asking because, for myself, but I have a friend who, Damien, man, huge wrestling fan. And by the way, you may have caught the episode on the 90s Galore podcast, my other podcast. we profiled WWE and pro wrestling, kind of looked at the history and stuff of pro wrestling and the WWF. Back then it was WWF. But we're seriously into wrestling, man. I'm going to turn him on to some of these podcasts you're telling me about, because he would love those. He loves those behind the scenes stories and all that stuff that went on. And, you know, that's you can't write that stuff, bro.
No, right. And like, you know, one more thing, like, especially for him, for somebody like that, the channel Vice, they're currently doing like documentaries on like crazy stories that have happened in the professional wrestling business. They did a documentary on the Chris Benoit situation. That's on YouTube right now, so you can go out there on the Vice channel and watch it.
Oh, okay.
Where they interviewed like his son. They interviewed like other wrestlers who were a part of it and what happened on that day that they found out, like how like, you know, and then there's even photos of the crime scene that Vice got that they show.
Wow.
But Vice is doing this series right now. It's called the Dark Side of the Ring, where they do all these crazy stories that are in the wrestling world. So like the Chris Benoit story, the Bret Hart when he got screwed in Montreal in 1997.
Oh, wow.
There's one coming out, Bret Hart's brother Owen Hart, who died in 1999. That one's coming out in a few weeks.
Oh, wow.
And they've done other ones like on Bruiser Brody, who was an old school wrestler.
Yeah, I've heard of Bruiser Brody.
You know, they've done one on him. There's one that I think comes out this week on Jimmy Superfly Snuka, that he was allegedly a part of a murder of his girlfriend, but they said that Vince McMahon helped him hide it. So they did a story on that. So if you're definitely a wrestling fan, you know, regardless if you think it's fake or not, those documentaries on Vice, if you go on YouTube or you have the Vice channel, those documentaries are geared towards just regular fans, because they give you the backstory. When they mention something, they give you what the word means or what it all means. It's not just geared to wrestling fans, it's geared to all fans, so you can understand what they're saying as they're taking you through the documentary. It's pretty good. It's very well done.
Wow. I got to see that, man. I got to check that out, man. Vice channel. Yeah. Noted, man. Noted. Thank you, Danny, man. Hey, Danny, before we go, man, before we wrap things up here, I want to maybe take one more question from Mr. James Taylor. And he was asking, I think, if since you have a UK fan base, what do you think of Michelle Phelps?
She's from I don't know where James lives, but she's from Temecula, so she's out here in Southern California, but she also lives in England, I think, as well. But she's a prominent reporter in the sport of boxing. She has her own YouTube channel. It's called Behind the Gloves. You know, and she's gotten big interviews. She's interviewed some of the biggest fighters and personalities in the sport. So wow. She's a hustler, man. Whether people want, like, I'm not a hater, man. Like, you know, even if there's some people I don't agree with, like, I can't hate on their hustle, like, you know, and she worked hard where she's at. You know, if you type in Behind the Gloves onto YouTube, you'll see some of her interviews and stuff. And she does her thing, man. You know, some people hate her, some people love her, but she's a hustler and she's worked hard for it.
Absolutely, man. You got to give credit where credit's due. You know, I think in any walk of life, man. I have an appreciation for successful people, man. You know, and definitely don't hate. No, man. Danny, man, it's you know, I've been a pleasure having you come on the debut episode of the Profile Pod. You've been great, man. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, no worries, man. You know, anytime you need me to come back on, just let me know. You know, I got some guys. You know, like I said, I got guys. If you need somebody to profile, I can look through my Rolodex and see who I can get for you. I got a friend who's an MMA reporter from New York. He's also, like I said, he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He knows MMA like the back of his hand. He knows everything. Awesome. So if you want to profile like an MMA reporter guy and who knows the sport, I can give him a ring. Maybe he can help you out like that.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, speaking of that arena, you know, the whole MMA, jiu-jitsu, my brother Gus is going to come on. here as soon as this quarantine and everything gets lifted and everything goes back to normal.
Tell him to answer my text.
Oh, there you go, Gus. Gus, you're on the clock.
He won't let me come over because of social distancing. It's hurting my feelings.
Hey, you could maybe just you can stay out. He could stay at the. He could talk to you from the door, and you just come up to the driveway.
That's all I want, man. That's all I want. That's all I need.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that, bro? But yeah, he's gonna come on, Danny, and he's got a soap line coming out. Anyway, so
cool.
Yeah, man, I would love to have. We're definitely going to talk about that. Here in the near future, and we'll bring on more guests, man. You're welcome back anytime, Danny, to the Profile Pod. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Danny Z from the Last Round Podcast. Catch it every week, Monday nights. And don't miss it, man. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Stitcher. And among other platforms, all the major platforms, catch the Last Round Podcast. As for the Profile Pod, thank you for tuning in once again, ladies and gentlemen, the debut episode. If you are interested in coming on the Profile Podcast, the Profile Pod, please DM me at 90s Galore at 90s_GALORE. If you want to come on as a co-host, just like Danny did tonight, profile your business, your podcast, service, any type of product, DM me. Let's do it. Let's get you on. Let's get you some promotion, some exposure to whatever it is you're doing, and we'll make it happen. Let's help each other out. Artists, helping artists, entrepreneurs, hustlers, all that good stuff. So definitely contact us at 90s Galore on Instagram. Also on Twitter at 90s Galore, 90SGALORE. That's Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you from wherever you're tuning in for checking us out on YouTube here. And we're going to have the Profile Pod probably, I want to say every Tuesday episodes. We're still ironing out the kinks as we move along here in the initial stages of the Profile Pod. I mean, last night we just had our pilot episode, so I think we made a lot of headway in one day. So we're making progress. I got my cousin right here in my corner, and I'm gonna he's definitely my mentor now, my podcast mentor. It's funny how life comes full circle, man. Full circle. Man. My younger cousin.
We can't get away from each other, man. It doesn't happen.
No, man. Yeah, absolutely. So, James Taylor, I want to thank you for participating, engaging, being part of the show tonight, James. I want to give another shout out to Christian Martinez, longtime friend, and the Martinez family. I've known them since 95 when I was up in the Navy. They took care of me like my second family, my family away from family. So anyways, that's a story for another episode of the Profile Pod or the 90s Galore. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you soon. Everybody, have a great night. As for Danny Z, I'm Andy Zaldivar. Always remember to take it easy.